No,
that this panel and the tool that we are participating is a result of collaboration between several institutions. El Colegio de la Frontera Norte, we are really thankful for the support and the willingness to be part of this. Dr. Alberto Hernández, presidente of el Colegio de la Frontera Norte, has been really supported and instrumental in doing this. I also want to thank Denise Moreno Duquesne from the Center for US-Mexican Studies, University of California, San Diego. She has been also really involved, supportive in all this. And Paul Gaster, that also helped us to coordinate the two tours that we had in San Diego starting on Wednesday. Some of you were participating in that activity. Before opening the panel, I just want to say that a lot of people help us in many different ways. One person that is not present here and was really active, taking leadership role in organizing this activity is Rocío Barajas Escamilla. She is the director of the Department of Social Studies at the Colegio de la Frontera Norte. She was the one that invited our panelists to be today, and she and I put together the questions that we're going to be discussing, examining today during the conversation. So I really want to emphasize that Rocío, even when she's not here right now because she has to travel, was really critical in putting this together. I want to mention also some other people like Karina Gómez, asistente de la dirección del Departamento de Estudios Sociales del Colef. She helped us a lot. Maria Jose Rodrigo of the Office of the President of Colef. Also Brenda Macias, Nora Bringas, she's not here, but she also helped us on that. And I want to recognize the extraordinary work that Greg Mallinger did today guiding the tour. I was listening some of your comments just when you were getting here. He has been really committed to this, helping us in every moment. So I just want to thank Greg for doing this. And we are not done yet. I mean, there are more later after we have the reception. So I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to give the microphone to Dr. Cristina Alfaro, who is the Provost Chair of Faculty, Diversity, and Inclusion of San Diego State University. She is going to be our moderator, and she's going to present the four panelists that we have in this roundtable today. Cristina, thank you.
Okay. Buenas tardes. ¿Me pueden escuchar? Can you hear me? Yes? Okay. Okay. It is my pleasure to be here today and to be the moderator for this very important panel. So I am going to, first of all, have a brief introduction of our panelists. First, here sitting next to me to my left is Denise Moreno Duquesne, who is currently a Senior Policy Advisor at UC San Diego's Center for US-Mexican Studies, based at the School of Global Policy and Strategy. US-Mex contributes to the ongoing integration process between the US and Mexico by providing a forum for thought leaders to engage in public dialogue, training future leaders, and supporting cutting-edge research. Duquesne also served in the California State Senate from 2002 to 2010, in the California State Assembly from 1994 to 2000, and on San Diego Community College Board from 1990 to 94. She also served in both houses of the legislature, where she was the first woman and the first Latina to chair the budget committees. Also, that's really important to know is that prior to her service in the legislature, Duquesne was engaged in the private practice of law in the Barrio Logan community of San Diego. That's where I met you many years ago, and focused primarily in the areas of family immigration, general family law, and appointed juvenile and criminal appellate law. In recognition of her dedication to the U.S.-Mexico relationship, Denise was awarded the Premio Otil by the Mexican government in 2014 and was appointed that same year by President Barack Obama to the board of the North American Development. So this is Denise Ducheney. And the next one that I have is Roberto Sánchez Rodríguez. Es profesor en el Departamento de Estudios Urbanos y el Medio Ambiente del Colegio de la Frontera Norte y miembro del Sistema Nacional de Investigadores. Sus temas de investigación y publicaciones se encuentran en la adaptación del cambio climático, el desarrollo sostenible, cambios globales en el ambiente, la relación entre comercio y el ambiente, la nueva geografía de la urbanización global y problemas transfronterizos. Fue director del Instituto de la Universidad de California sobre México, US-Mexico, profesor en el Departamento de Ciencias Ambientales en la Universidad de California, Riverside, y profesor asociado en el Departamento de Estudios Ambientales en la Universidad de California, Santa Cruz. Él ha participado en diversas iniciativas internacionales del Programa de Naciones Unidas para el Medio Ambiente, el Programa de Naciones Unidas para el Desarrollo, el Consejo Internacional para la Ciencia y el Consejo Internacional de las Ciencias Sociales. Desde octubre de 2015 es vicepresidente del Grupo de Trabajo del Panel número 2 para el Cambio Climático para el periodo de 2016 hasta 2022. Okay, Roberto Sánchez. Y aquí al lado de Denise Ducheney está el doctor Alberto Hernández Hernández, que es presidente de Colef. Mucho gusto. Okay. El doctor Hernández Hernández es integrante fundador del presidente y presidente del colegio de Colef. Es doctor de sociología. Sus líneas de investigación son políticas públicas, de religión y cambios sociales. Es integrante del Sistema Nacional de Investigadores Nivel 3. Entre sus últimas publicaciones se encuentran los libros La Santa Muerte, Espacios, Cultos, Devociones, el Colef, el Colzón 2016 y Mudar de Credo en Contextos de Movilidad. Las interconexiones entre la migración y el cambio religioso, y tiene muchos más. Él colaboró en la coordinación de la encuesta nacional sobre creencias y prácticas religiosas en México en 2016. Doctor Hernández Hernández. Y ahora les presento a James Gerber, y tengo una vida muy larga. Así es que voy a escoger unas cuantas cosas de decir aquí. Él es profesor en la Universidad Estatal de San Diego State, y él ha publicado, tiene muchas publicaciones acerca, les voy a leer unos títulos, por ejemplo, A Great Deal of Ruin, Financial Crisis since 1929, International Economics, 50 Years of Change on the U.S. Border, Agricultural and Rural Connections in the Pacific. Estos son libros. These are books that he's published, and then he has many papers, several pages here, of many peer-reviewed journals that have to do with the topic that we are going to engage today. He also has many grants that he has been awarded, where he, some of the topics are International Economics, Fundación México, Estados Unidos para las Ciencias. Another one of that sort is also Foreign Language and Area Studies in the from the U.S. Department of Education, and many more. Okay, so he is currently a professor emeritus in economics at San Diego State, and he teaches courses that have to do with international economics, comercio internacional, and he teaches in Spanish, North American relations, and international monetary theory and policy, and many more. So it is my pleasure to introduce the entire panel that will be speaking with you today. Let's give them a big round of applause. Okay. So we have a set of 4 questions, and I think since we are a bilingual audience, right? Am I correct? That's not true? So are we going to be...
are we English? Mostly English? More English?
Mostly English. And our panel is bilingual? No. Well, okay, this is going to be... I am going to say, I'm going to do this. I am going to ask the question in English and in Spanish, okay? and then I guess wherever possible, our panelists can speak in both. And Dr. Hernandez, we can help to.
I don't think there's not a lot of the audience that's Spanish only, right? It's mostly English only, to the extent it's only. Got a lot of French speakers and such out there, right? All over the world. So the common language tends to be English in the audience.
The common language is English. Okay, so then I will just ask the question in English. Is that okay, Roberto? ¿Puedo hacer la pregunta en inglés? ¿Está bien? Sí. Okay, I'll ask the question in English, and then we will, I guess, maybe ask questions, and we will do the translation as needed. Is that okay? Let's just, we'll be flexible. Okay?
We'll make it work.
Okay, so the first question for the panel is, what are the two most important lessons we have learned from the past efforts to advance cross-border coordination and collaboration between Tijuana and San Diego, and to what extent are these lessons relevant for the rest of the U.S.-Mexico border?
I guess I'll start since I'm sitting next to Christina. Thank you all for being here. Did you all have fun at the brewery, the Greg group? Yeah, okay. So that group is ready for us. Craft brewing is one of those cross-border things that Jim can explain to you about cross-border economies. Craft brewing is now one of our favorite cross-border economies here. And this, I think, at least from my perspective, and I always start with this in some ways, but there was a speaker of the U.S. Congress some years ago. His name was Tip O'Neill. He was from Boston. And he said, all politics are local. And my argument is always that all politics, especially on the border, are local. And the challenge we always have is that what our local issues get thrown into this mix of federal concerns. And we have to have a federal overlay on top of our efforts to solve what otherwise would be considered local and regional issues. So, the biggest thing I think we've learned over the last at least 25 plus years that I've been engaged in a lot of this discussion and work is that solutions come from local groups coming together, whether it's local governments, NGOs, universities. Solutions tend to come from there. And often what we finally learned, it took us a while, is that you present it to the federal government and you get them to bless them and then you move forward. If you wait for the federal government to solve something for you, you just wait too long. And then when they do it, they mess it up. My favorite example here, at least, was when NAFTA passed in the early 90s. Everybody figured out, the federal government said, oh, okay, this new trade agreement is coming. There's going to be all sorts of new trade going back and forth between the states and Mexico. So we need these new border crossings. And they built, in our case, Otay 2 and in the east end of California, Calexico East. And we're going to have trucks coming through here, and it's great. Except they forgot to check with anybody or find out that there were no roads on either side going to either of those crossings. For all practical purposes, we had no freeways and no transportation access in and out of these wonderful new border crossings that they built for us. So the lesson we took from that was we need to think now. And so the new crossing that we are now planning for Otay 2 is being designed with the access roads as part of the planning process. It's that kind of change. And in between there, California and Baja California came up with what I thought was one of the more innovative things that happened over these last 20 years, was the California-Baja California Border Master Plan for Transportation. It's where the two states came together. We had all the federal agencies at the table, but the two states were the driving force with their local agencies. I mean, the tables have to get kind of big, about the size of this room, because it takes all the federal agencies, all the local agencies, all the state agencies to be in the discussion to make it work. But the driving force were the states to create the plan that then you take to bridges and border crossings. And then the federal government thought we were geniuses and asked everybody else along the border to do the same thing. I think that's the kind of example and regional leadership that we need to encourage.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to add to that question?
Yeah, so adding on to that, excuse me. There are two things I'd say that that I've learned in recent years. One has to do with information, and the other has to do with institutions. On the institutional side, what distinguishes border regions, at least this border region, and I would say the entire U.S.-Mexico border region, I assume this is somewhat similar elsewhere, is that the institutions become binational even when that's not intended. That due to the proximity, due to social networks, and due to externalities, what economists call externalities, unintended consequences, things spill over from one side to the other in unanticipated ways. And this has really profound effects, because it means that what happens in Tijuana is not just a function of Mexican institutions. It's also a function of, and it's obvious when you put it like this, it's a function of U.S. institutions as well, and the rules and the organizational forms that we have on the U.S. side. And there's a similar effect on San Diego from Mexican institutions. I'm not claiming it's symmetrical. That's another study, but it definitely is. The institutions become binational. That's the first thing. The second thing I would say that's important is that there's a lot of information we don't have. There's a lot of things we would like to know about border communities, border cities, border towns, and we just don't know. For example, there's a flow of people from Tijuana to San Diego who work, and a flow from San Diego to Tijuana. How many people are those? How much do they earn? Where do they spend their income? This could have quite significant effects on local communities if they're earning on one side and bringing it back to the other side. We don't know that. What's the gross regional product, a basic indicator of Tijuana? We don't know that with any kind of accuracy. It's not measured officially. You can estimate it, but there's not official estimates. And so I would say that there's a whole world of information out there that we would like to have, and that we should somehow figure out how to obtain in a systematic, ongoing way. But at this moment in time, we just don't have it.
Thank you.
Bueno, yo escribí unas notas acerca de las preguntas en relación a la pregunta que nos hace Cristina. Bueno, yo quisiera decir que a lo largo de nuestra historia-relación ha habido muchas lecciones. En el tema de desarrollo urbano hemos aprendido mucho de experiencias previas, particularmente porque la planeación entre ambas sociedades es muy diferente. Los motores de crecimiento económico, demográfico y urbano son diferentes entre ambas ciudades, de modo que los problemas urbanos asociados también lo son. Por ello, los objetivos de desarrollo y de planeación a escala de toda la ciudad difieren en ambos lados de la frontera. Sin embargo, también es claro que prácticamente toda intervención o ausencia de estas tiene repercusiones en una ciudad que en otra. Además, las diferencias de las circunstancias y dinámicas urbanas, sociales, económicas y ambientales, las diferencias de marcos institucionales, que son también muy distintas y normativos, también determinan los procesos de coordinación y de colaboración transfronteriza. Podemos decir que hemos identificado en esta relación Tijuana-San Diego pues complejidades y relaciones muy diferentes. Yo los podría clasificar estos problemas en tres grandes categorías: diferentes, similares y compartidos. En términos diferentes, tenemos una urbanización muy distinta. En este caso, en Tijuana, una urbanización inconclusa, con grandes zonas de la ciudad con falta de servicios, pavimento, agua potable y muchos servicios. Problemas que San Diego, por supuesto, la otra ciudad no presenta. Problemas que decía yo similares, tenemos dos situaciones parecidas, las dos tienen una extensión física como ciudades en expansión, sin embargo, estas tienen distintas razones, su expansión. En problemas compartidos tenemos consecuencias y problemas similares en términos de problemas ambientales, contaminación y aprovechamiento de recursos naturales, y de obstáculos para el cruce fronterizo de personas y mercancías, problema que cada vez es mayor. Problemas de salud, también compartidos, y problemas de seguridad, tráfico de armas, de personas y cada vez más el problema de la migración. Estos problemas compartidos son una oportunidad también para crear un diálogo y realizar esfuerzos. Los esfuerzos, creo, deben centrarse en abordar los problemas compartidos, creo que es una necesidad. En temas ambientales tenemos pues un avance importante, por supuesto, porque es un problema grave el recurso hídrico para ambas ciudades, y tenemos entonces experiencias de cómo trabajar en este recurso compartido pero de alguna manera también hay conflictos que se avecinan. En temas de conflictos ambientales hay muchos más. En temas de salud, por supuesto, también tenemos muchas lecciones. Y en temas educativos creo que también hemos tenido una necesidad de aprender, porque de alguna manera había muchos esquemas que nos invitaban a hacer una colaboración más estrecha. Algunas por razones burocráticas, cada vez se han estado flexibilizando, y ahora vemos un esquema un poquito más abierto en temas educativos. De alguna manera creo que hay, decía yo, los contrastes, pero hay también muchas áreas de oportunidad para ambas sociedades.
Did you understand all that? I would like to request some help, but I will just would like to outline three things that he did say, and that is that they've identified that there are three areas that are very important for us to consider, and that is number one, the differences between looking at Mexico and California in this case, just right across the border, San Diego, what's similar and what we share. So just very briefly, the things that are different is looking at living conditions, looking at water and other areas. Similar, we have expansion on both sides that's going on, and something that we share is contamination of the water, and I'm sure we're going to talk more about that later. Health, safety, and education. So just very briefly, those are some 3 points, and I don't know if there's anything else, Roberto, that I missed that maybe you could.
Perhaps on the urban planning and the two cities, how they have. I don't have a microphone.
Oh, speak loud then.
Okay. Perhaps also the issue of urban planning that has different. Even louder?
¿Nos pueden conseguir un micrófono?
No. Is that okay?
No, the other one was.
I'm going to move. Perhaps only the issue of urban planning, and there are differences and similarities between the two sides of the border, and even though there has been some development in trying to have a better communication, there are still significant differences in urban planning systems in the two sides of the border that are important to take into consideration.
Thank you.
Can I just... Okay, I would like to take a different approach to the question of the two lessons. And for me, one of the most important lessons that we have learned from the experience in the Tijuana-San Diego border that is useful for the rest of the border and perhaps for all the borders is the fact that these borders illustrate the difference beyond only considering the border as a divide between two nations. That is critical. As we saw in the film, this is a porous border. It's not only problems, but there are also a lot of practices that go on every day to trade, tourism, industry, social relations, cultural relations. So they are key. And one of the most important lessons is that we need to look beyond only the divide through nationalism, which is the traditional approach to border areas and border regions. I think one of the key issues, and this appears in the literature on looking at border areas, is the fact that the borderlands is actually built and rebuilt dynamically through border processes, and these processes being cultural, economic, social, etc., really have a different manifestation in the territory, in the borderland. And recognizing those differences help us mitigate, at some point, go beyond the political stress that causes by the definition of redefinition of sovereignty and nationalism, and of these key concepts that are characteristic of border areas. Perhaps one of the key areas to redefine is sovereignty, which has different manifestations, but is being used as a political weapon against most of the divide in two areas. And the second most important lesson is what we don't know. And we don't know a lot about border processes. One of the most important elements is the power relations. We need to improve our knowledge of how different forms of power, economic, political, ideological power, do have an impact on those borderland processes. we need to also improve our knowledge on how those impacts are actually defining the way the borderlands are growing. And this has to do with a lot of what the previous speakers have said before me, that in order to really move beyond this traditional approach of borderlands as a divide between two nations, we need to also improve the construction of these borderlands to border processes.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we'll go to the second question now, and that is, what benefits can Tijuana and San Diego derive from more and better coordination of their development policies and plans, especially under the current political environment? Okay, Denise, we'll go first again.
All right. You know, a lot of what we need to do, kind of just bouncing off of the last speaker, is think about how to create ongoing infrastructure, but infrastructure in the political sense of the word. How do you create mechanisms, I guess is the word. And we've been around this block a few times, and we had the border liaison mechanisms that the consuls did, and we have COBRO that San Diego's had for a long time through what is our regional government association in San Diego, SANDAG. But we always, we struggle to create entities that can survive different elections and changes in government and all of those kinds of things. So the need for some way to consider how to do governance is huge. And what we need to coordinate, and we see it more and more every day, again recently, but the issues of the Tijuana River, have been, and the Tijuana River watershed, which is a cross-border watershed, have been there with us for 30 years. And if we don't address it together, I think the fundamental piece people need to get to on both sides is if we don't address it together, it doesn't get addressed. So nobody can, in fact, resolve water quality, trash issues, urban planning issues. None of those things, in fact, get resolved if you only look at them with one side of the border. It just doesn't work. We are too close together. We don't even have that nice little river like the Texans do separating them. We're just right up against it. If you saw the fence as you're coming here, if you're out on the Otay Mesa, if you're in San Ysidro, it's just right in your face. I mean, it's just, it's a line and it's there. If you've seen our new the coolest thing in border, whatever, is the Cross-Border Express, our new air terminal that takes you on a little walkway. We call it the bridge over the fence. We had those T-shirts made up in 2016. In California, we build bridges, not walls. And it literally is a bridge over the fence that lets you walk from an air terminal in San Diego to fly out of the Tijuana airport. And it is sort of one of our best examples of a cross-border, but it was done all with private capital, all with private building. All we needed from the federal governments was the permission to do it, and then the staffing of the immigration on each end of the bridge. As people walk in and out of that terminal. But it's that kind of connection, and it's literally, the reason we could do that is because the Tijuana airport literally sits, here's the fence, there's a 4-lane road, and there's the airport. And because of that, we were able to build a bridge over that fence and over the 4-lane road to the airport. That kind of urban connection as we both grow and as we do urbanization. So now we're looking at San Ysidro. Some of you just came through the new plaza. There's an effort to try to make it look like a gateway, not like a barrier. And how do we make the two plazas, as you wander from one side to the other, from the trolley to Mexico and back again, how do we create an urban space that's really a joint urban space? We wish we had trolley that went from one side to the other. It doesn't work that way here. But how you get transportation, how you make it more pedestrian friendly, how do you make it welcoming to people, and how do you create that as a joint space? How do we look at it as a joint space is the biggest challenge I think all of us have faced with this urbanization. And then, of course, and we can talk about rivers and sewage and trash as much as y'all want later, but all of those issues, and what we're increasingly finding in that arena is we need mechanisms, again, where you actually force people to sit together on a regular basis and that there's institutionalized to survive elections and some of those things. Our current effort on the Tijuana River is centered around the IBWC SILA's as Minute 320, we call it. It's the minute that they signed that tries to create some work groups. But again, these were federal governments making an agreement. God bless them for doing it and trying. But unless all the right players who tend to be state and local are at those tables doing the work group and being the core group, it won't succeed. So trying to force how do we shape the creature that can, in fact, help look at the entire watershed from both sides at the same time and address priorities that way. That's, I think, always our biggest challenge is how do we create the mechanisms.
Thank you.
Bueno, yo creo que hay, por supuesto, muchas oportunidades si se busca esa coordinación. Creo que hay un gran reto en la parte ambiental y lo que no hagamos en materia ambiental tiene un efecto, por supuesto, muy severo para ambas sociedades. Hay una serie de interacción muy fuerte en términos de niveles micro, de esta microrregión, diríamos, en términos de conexiones de relaciones familiares binacionales, de proyectos productivos como proyectos Cali-Baja, de relaciones en muchas dimensiones. Y yo creo que si esas relaciones ya tácitas que existen tienen un componente de mejor planeación y organización, esto tendría un efecto más importante. Sin duda, los retos en materia de desarrollo urbano son importantes y aunque tienen perspectivas distintas una y otra sociedad en relación a lo que son sus prioridades urbanas, creo que hay una necesidad de colaboración. Sin duda, el tema más complicado es el tema de recursos hídricos, el tema del agua, y creo que es donde a veces menos se avanza en términos de las coordinaciones y planeaciones. Por supuesto, hay algunas ideas de cómo podemos trabajar el tema del agua. En el tema de salud creo que hemos tenido muchas iniciativas importantes y avances en una temática binacional sobre salud fronteriza, en programas de frontera saludable y en campañas de prevención de carácter binacional que tienen un efecto importante. Hace poquito también se implementó un proyecto que se llama Diplomado de Líderes a través de las fronteras, y esto es muy interesante porque es trabajar en el área de salud pública de manera que podamos compartir experiencias, trabajamos juntos, porque hay cosas que son muy comunes. En fin, creo que son la parte, desde luego en la parte educativa hay muchas cosas que se están buscando, a veces no se avanzan, hemos tenido reuniones con la presidenta de San Diego State y a veces nos dicen, pues es que es un problema que podríamos resolver, ya lo plantea la cónsul, pero hay una serie de condiciones que son federales y a veces no podemos hacer, y a veces son condiciones que hacen imposible que los estudiantes puedan tener una interacción como se buscaría más fácil, y no es así.
That was a lot. Okay. So help me, panel. But something that I'm going to capitalize on is what you said at the end, and that is just the whole issue of water. And we have Dr. Paul Gangster that's sitting here at the front row. And at San Diego State, based on the visit that our president made to Colef, where was it, in the fall? December? I forget what day it was. We are going to be holding a conference at San Diego State. Maybe you already heard about it. It's Reimagining the Border Region, and the theme is going to be water. And if you want more information, our leader for that conference is sitting right there. But to talk about these issues and to really develop this, I think one of the things you said is building relationships, such as the project in Cali-Baja, and then working with leaders across borders that are willing to do this work and really take on an issue and try to find a solution to it and not just talk about it. So anyone else want to help me with this?
I think one important issue he mentioned is the fact that formal constraints by the two governments hinder the development of other initiatives. For instance, he used the example of the relationship between San Diego State and Colegio de la Frontera Norte that impose limitations on how students can take classes on both sides of the border. So that's also a key issue.
Thank you. Jim?
Thank you. So two things that so far stand out, transport and water infrastructure. These are areas where there are enormous spillover effects, and neither side by itself can seriously address these issues, as has been mentioned already. I want to focus on a slightly different thing, and I want to be a little bit critical of the San Diego-Tijuana business community, which has tried to market the San Diego-Tijuana area to the globally as an area where there's tremendous complementarities, where you've got advanced science and technology in San Diego, you've got financial capital, and then on the Mexican side, you have lots of labor and manufacturing capability. So there's this model, a kind of a traditional model of comparative advantage in which we're going to use the strengths of each side, and if you put these together, this creates a region. And locally they have branded it Cali Baja. It creates a region which offers you everything you need if you want to locate your manufacturing or other business in the area. You've got inexpensive labor, you've got science and technology, you've got finance, etc. That's not entirely wrong. I don't want to say that that's completely wrong, but I think it's out of step with changes in manufacturing and the ways in which global value chains are being constructed. But it's also out of step with changes in Mexican educational practices and the really increasing level of education that you find amongst young people in Mexico. The younger generations, people below 25, have a completely different set of labor market skills than what that image presents. The universities, local universities like UABC, for example, are generating a lot of engineers and a lot of technicians with very good training. And this model that we have, that you come to Mexico for cheap labor, I think is just the wrong way to market this region. And I think that we do ourselves an injustice when we do that. And I just, I think this is an area where some changes in the way that the two business communities collaborate could really create a whole new vision of what this area actually offers.
Thank you very much. I would like to take a pause right now before I go to the next two questions.
Wait, one more response.
I'm so sorry, Roberto.
I'm just going to follow up in
Okay, I'm
the
sorry.
previous speakers mentioned about this question, and for me, it's also one of the key areas is looking into possible opportunities to define new paths of growth for the area, for the borderland, San Diego, Tijuana, as well as other parts of the border. And this includes making a different use of resources, particularly scarce resources in the area. Water is one of them, but also looking into new ways of growing in the 21st century. For instance, the use of energy and how it relates to climate change, and the efforts by the two sides of the border to really cut on their emissions and define different ways of growing. And build that in conjunction with scarce resources will make a big difference in the opportunities that the area has for the future. This area, this part of the continent, and both on the U.S. and the Mexican side, is going to be severely hit by climate change. The scenarios built for climate change is that there will be not only less water, but the quality of the water will also decline because of the scarce resources, scarce sources of water. On top of that, on top of the scenarios of climate change, there are the scenarios for drought in the area. And the scenarios for drought for the next decades are going to be severe. So we are looking into the scenarios for the next 45, 50 years of the two possible worst combinations. There's going to be drought, and it's going to be severe, less water. But when it rains, we will have extreme events and flooding in the area. So that's the worst possible combination. And the area, Tijuana, suffers severely for drought, for flooding in different years. And there's no exception. I mean, in the future, will only look worse. Now, having said that, I think that the opportunities that can emerge for the future have also to do with what some of the previous speakers were alluding to, the way we define the area, the borderline on the two sides of the border, but also how the informal relations in the area can help us circumvent some of the constraints that the formal national governments actually impose into the area. And this has been also one of the lessons that we have from the past. In times of political crisis, even where the border has been closed, this is what happened a few weeks ago is not the first time that the border is closed. Even when the border is closed because of political pressure by by one of the governments that impose on the other government, even on those critical times, there have been informal relations that have kept what I was mentioning before, that the borderlands processes alive. And it's through the informal relationships that this border continues to grow and circumvene some of the formal constraints.
Thank you so much. One of the things that I can't help but add, because my area is education, and when we talk about what affects the United States and over here things that we share, is the education of our children. Right now we have in the United States over 700,000 students that we share, and in the California, Baja California border, we had 54,000 students that we share. So that means that there are many students that either are being deported or their parents are being deported, and they end up in schools over here, and guess what? They don't speak Spanish. So we right now have a program where we call it the Students That We Share. So we're preparing teachers on both sides of the border to be bilingual, so that students will have better opportunities of being able to take advantage of their academic growth. Just wanted to share that. But what I wanted to pose is that the next two questions are going to deal with research and also with working with universities. But I wanted to take just a quick pause to see if there are any questions, because a lot of ground has been covered and some really, really critical areas have been discussed. If maybe you would like a little bit of clarification or just have a follow-up question for some of our panelists, and then we'll go on to the next two questions. That brewery did you in, huh? Do we have one question?
Or comment.
Or a comment. It doesn't have to be a question. It could be a comment, or you could add to.
Yeah. You.
The lady with the with the
the
lady with the SPSU
yeah,
colors.
Yeah.
Sorry. Could you hear me or not
Yes.
before?
Yeah.
Okay. So one is
Security
in the border and the whole area of this kind of militarization of the border, and what does it mean for the communities. And the other is about education and the potential that we have to have these bilingual students that may offer a huge resource for all of us in this area. So I just want to if you can talk about these two things. Thank you.
To quickly on the security, my argument is always, and this is the same thing, the air quality, the water quality, all of those things, it doesn't work for one side, doesn't have it if the other side doesn't have it. And in my view, security, I think of not in the border sense of the word, but in the public security sense of the word. And the argument is usually really, to the extent Baja California, including really the whole peninsula, is not secure, then we're not secure. And it has more to do with the drugs and the gangs and the violence issues are where that focus, when you say security in a border region, that's what I think of, not the concertina wire that y'all had to drive through to get here today, which is all new. You should all know that's only been in the most recent wave of bringing the military here. They had to think of something for them to do, so they gave them that. But security isn't about immigration here. It's about having, and it takes, and this has been a real challenge that I don't know if anybody here has done, but it's been done in the past, and right now the environment may make it difficult, but in fact, we had a lot of joint task forces dealing with those kinds of issues at the police level. It's local police working together in intelligence. It's local attorney generals. It's the rule of law business that's happening in changes in Mexico, trying to bring the new rule of law in. Those kinds of things are what I would call security issues and need strengthening. The procuradoras, the judicial, for us, what do you get? Parolees, right? There was a period, I remember one president of Mexico screaming at me one time, y'all release these criminals you deport them into Mexico and you don't tell us about their criminal record in California, right? We didn't have mechanisms even to say, we just let this guy out of jail and the INS grabbed him and deported him, but his record wasn't going with him, so Mexico could figure out how to deal with him, right? It's those kinds of issues that we think of as security. And I just want to piggyback on Cristina's, what she's talking about, the program, the students we share is something that UC and SDSU and Colef and UABC have all been involved in together. And it goes to part of what Jim was saying. It's that we call it the binational workforce. Is beyond the bilingual, part of one of the pilot programs that's coming out of that research that we've been doing on this binational, los estudiantes que compartimos, is we're working now on binational career paths. And it's trying to show these companies, and Jim could speak more to this, and I was kind of going to save it, flops into the next question on research. This huge struggle we had, and Jim was part of this, trying to figure out how to get the economics even to tell the story in numbers that people could believe. And what we found, even at the economics level, is what he was talking about, is really shared production. It's no longer just we invent it and you make it. It's really a shared production, and the thing goes around several times, and there's a whole pattern to that. And it is new technologies. At least in California, Baja California, we're not yes, we are still the TV capital of the world, but we also do aerospace. We're making biomedical devices. We are bringing companies into the region because they can have the software engineers that are being educated at CETIS and UABC. Those kinds of and having that binational workforce, understanding that bilingual is a plus, bicultural is a plus, and there are a lot of folks, businesses who can use that and using that to attract businesses, not just sort of low-skilled labor as a way to attract business, but in fact a binationally educated workforce.
Just a quick comment on security. One of the areas of power relations that we need to improve our knowledge is precisely the power of discourse. And this is a perfect time to do research on that area because of the power of discourse on security, crossing the border, avoiding terrorists, hindering migration, undocumented goods, etc. Unfortunately, the power of discourse is affecting the way the borderlands actually function, and how the kind of operation. And we need to improve our knowledge in terms of not only how is that affecting the borderland, but also what is the time frame of the power of discourse. Or for that matter, also the power of knowledge, for instance, what has been just said by Denise and others. I mean, knowledge represents power, and is shared unequally across the border, but it's a resource for the borderland to actually develop.
Okay, excellent. We're going to go ahead and go to our next question because, as you know, we have researchers up here, and the next question is about research. So, and then we also are going to try to finish at 5:15, even though we started a little late. What research areas should be supported in order to build conceptual frameworks encouraging regional development and trans-border cooperation in short, medium, and long term?
Harmonized data. My only thing. So, Jim.
Yeah, okay. Well, we don't have to invent the wheel on this because, Colef was established around, I think, 1982. And it was established with a specific purpose of doing what this question asks. And so if we look at the departments that Colef has, that's an agenda for researching the border region. So just many of you are not from here, so let me just tell you what they are. They have public administration, economics, cultural studies, demography, social studies, and urban and environmental studies. You know, and each of these have sub-disciplines within them, but this institution was designed to do exactly what that question says. Now, here's the problem. Colef needs to expand to the other side.
Yeah.
We need an institution like this in San Diego. We don't have anything that comes close to this with the dedication and the quality of research and scholarship that goes on here. It would, I think, benefit us enormously if we had a counterpart to this institution.
Well, I like that.
Let's make it happen.
Yeah, it's too standard numbers.
We at Colef have over 30 years of research in the border, but one of the, and to be self-critical about our institution is one of the areas that we have not done a lot, and this is not the fault of Colef, but it's, I think internationally, if you look into the literature on borderlands, on borders, one of the missing pieces is precisely the theory. I mean, we have done fantastic work on documenting case studies, analyzing case studies all over the world in terms of borders, but there is not theory of borders. And it's very difficult to actually develop a theory of borders because of the heterogeneity of the borders, but we can build conceptual frameworks for the specific border areas because we can control the dimensions that are involved in those. And this is a task that we need to work on. I mean, building conceptual frameworks for this border area, and as well as methodological frameworks. We did an exercise here at Colef, 9 colleagues and myself. We actually did an exercise of bringing together different dimensions and trying to develop a methodology that actually looks into how the different dimensions interact, trying to figure out what are the defining process that actually impact the way the borderlands grow on both sides, and considering how they are affected across the border, from demographics, health, migration, culture, political, the governance, governability, labor relations, urban issues, environmental issues, etc. And it was a very interesting exercise. It's going to be published soon, and I have to share that. But it's looking into a methodology that actually looks into complex issues. It's the same methodology that has been applied, for instance, by the International Science Council to look into the Sustainable Development Goals. It's been used, for instance, by IPCC in some of the some assessments, etc. It's precisely the same methodology. There are a couple of other areas that I think are relevant in terms of research. I mentioned before the issue of power relations and how that impacts the borderland and how it defines the way the borderland actually grows. Another one is to have a better idea of how territoriality actually grows or defines or shapes or are actually changing in the border areas. And one of the parts that for the Mexican side, and perhaps this applies to other border areas around the world, for the Mexican side, it's also important to know that there are 2 borders for the borderlands in Mexico. It's the international border and the border with the rest of the country, which is different to the borderline. So we need to understand also how those function and how those different borders interact in the borderlands, because it defines the way the borderland grows.
I just to expand briefly on my harmonization issue, but there are so many issues here where when you try, at least from a public policy point of view, if you can't get the data that matches, if you can't figure out who's crossing, if you can't figure out what the economics are, if you have to spend 5 years figuring out how to match the categories of economic data, if you can't monitor water with this, where you're looking for the same contaminants at the same time in the same measurements, it makes it very difficult to come up with solutions. So that for here along the border, California has a pretty rigorous system of measuring the quality of water in the ocean. If we have the same system in playas, if Mexico's following the same data points and doing the same kind of monitoring, then we have a picture of water from Rosarito to Coronado. You have a different approach to how you look at these things. And it's that kind of data that we're always hungering for. Jim used the example too. The commuter, we all have an estimate of what those commuter workers are, but it is pretty much estimates. And a couple of times we've tried to do surveys with pedestrians, and there's been a few efforts at some of those things. Sandag is off again doing another wait time study. We've tried to monitorize, because this is how you change public policy. Well, we figured this out a few years ago. The business people came to us in part and said, just help us explain this story. When we want more border crossings and we go to Washington, we go to Mexico City, how do we explain it to them? And finally we had one study, but we're all still in 2019 using data from a 2007 study that Sandag did that says it's costing us X billion dollars a year in wait times, right? But that was before current crossings, and we've had renovations, and there's, everything in the world's changed. And then we had a recession when it was, wait times weren't bad because nobody wanted to come, and then you had, it changes. So how do we keep that kind of data? That's the other big challenge. How do you keep it current? We could find somebody somewhere who would fund y'all to do this stuff on a regular basis. Biggest challenge we have is we do this study and then it gets old. So the wait times, the economics, the workforce, how do we kind of keep those things and pick the key ones through discussions with others, but find those areas where we need to kind of have it on an ongoing basis.
Okay, and this takes us to our next million-dollar question, and that is, what role should universities play in building this collaborative joint development of the region? Roberto, you want to start with that?
Sure. Well, definitely universities or research institutions on both sides of the border, as we talk about this, need to build a better collaboration. But I believe that the key role of universities is to become actors of change, social change along the area. And this has to be done through different approaches on how universities participate in the process of change. It's not only by improving the way we collect data, analyzing that data, and building those results to research to decision makers. It's also by participating in generating a new kind of knowledge, transdisciplinary knowledge, not only interdisciplinary, understanding better the way the border functions, but also building transdisciplinary knowledge and participating actively in the design of policies and strategies for the border area. I think this is a key role for the universities, and one of the roles that we expect that we can begin operating in the near future.
Thank you. Jim?
So I like to make the joke that universities are filled with the most radical people you'll ever meet, behaving in the most conservative ways imaginable, right? And I think that dovetails to your point, Roberto. So we Americans are famous for our monolingualism. And yet here we are on a border where, in some respects, in terms of language, it's more like a European border in that there are so many speakers of another language. Yet we don't, this is something basic the university needs to do, and I applaud what you're doing, Christina, because we need our students to speak Spanish. We have to generate that. In Mexico, it's become a norm that if you're a college student, you will learn English. But there is no norm that students in San Diego learn Spanish. We should have at the university the largest Spanish department in the United States, given the demographics of our population and the size of the university, and we don't. That's a really, I think, a problematic thing. The other thing that's conservative about universities is that we don't really hire people to do border studies. Occasionally in one department or another, we might do that. But mostly we do a national search and people arrive with whatever specialties they're being hired for. And whether they might want to engage with colleagues in Mexico or do research outside of San Diego and Tijuana or other parts of the border region. This is not part of the hiring decision in any respect, except one or two departments occasionally will hire somebody for that purpose, but it's not a critical mass of people, right? So I think that we need to focus on language as a basic. It's we're asking how can we get to more advanced things when we're not doing some of the basic things that we need to do. And so language is one of them. And then, changing the hiring processes so that we hire the people who want to engage across the border, that understand how fascinating this region is. If you can get outside of San Diego, that if we can hire those people, this would make a really big difference. But good luck on changing hiring practices in the conservative university.
Well, I just have to mention that the department that I've been chair for the last 6 years, that's exactly what we hire, and everyone is bilingual, and they are interested in doing border studies and border education. So we might be the only department.
But you're education, right?
But it's education. It's education.
So
but it's still in education. Yeah.
But that's the question. I think it's a really interesting point. Is why isn't every department? What happens to us is we tend to do this boxing thing. Says, oh, border studies. If you have such a thing, it's over here. Paul's world was border, the California's, right? But nobody else on campus was. It's like, why isn't there a slot in poli-sci, 1 in economics, 3 in public administration, 2 in why isn't every department have something that relates to cross-border work? Right? We need somebody in all of those areas. I like the Colef model of where are the region, the areas that we need that. I build on the language one, and this is sort of interesting to me. It goes to the university problem. In San Diego, at least, we slowly but surely, and this is a lot of the work Christina and some of her colleagues have done, our new model of schools in some ways is dual immersion, right? Some of you from Canada, the French Canadians have done this a lot. We're finally getting there. So what's weird is that we have a whole bunch of schools in, for instance, Chula Vista, which is a city very near the border here. Chula Vista has 30-some schools who are dual immersion, so that the kids that go into that school, whether you come in speaking English or Spanish, you come out speaking both. And we do really good till you're in 6th grade. And then we drop you off a cliff, because there isn't the similar program as much in junior high and high school, although we're starting to get there slowly but surely in San Diego and Chula Vista and high school. And there is no college like that. Now, we have these 300 acres sitting in Chula Vista where a lot of us would like to see that college. That would be essentially a dual immersion college. And we've thought of it even as a Colef plus UC plus SDSU plus whoever wants to come play ball, but the campus would be all about bilingual, bicultural border. And unless we can start to think how to invent that, not just as a traditional university, but as a multi-institutional campus, but with the big theme, everybody who comes out of here will be a border-related person at whatever level and whatever topic they're interested in, until we sort of move in that direction. And just the last one is, folks really do need to work on the cross-border, the exchange programs, essentially. We don't have enough of that, and at least in California, we're really weak. We have way more Chinese students coming to California every year than we do Mexicans. That's weird. Makes no sense. I mean, we have a lot of Mexicans who come in as immigrants, and our schools are now largely Mexican immigrant children in our schools, and they are coming to our colleges now. We're doing better at educating immigrant Latino kids than we did in the past. So we have a lot of Mexican students, but they're not coming in, they're not returning to Mexico, right? Or they're not coming from Mexico or returning to Mexico. So thinking about that, and our California students should spend more time in Mexico. And when you're sitting on the border, why aren't you going every other day why aren't you spending a semester? But people spend a semester abroad. They'll go to Spain, and they don't go to Tijuana. It's a lot cheaper to go to Tijuana, You can go to Ensenada if you need a better beach, whatever. But but there's somehow we haven't managed to take advantage of those. Texas is better. They offer in-state tuition for Mexican students still, right? We haven't gotten there yet. But we have to find ways that our kids meet the other culture, and not just from the immigrant kid in your classroom, but actually go to the other culture and live in it for a while. If it's a summer, if it's a weekend, if it's a whatever. One of our best programs at UC is a summer program that allows high school students and community college age prepa and early college students to come to UCSD, but they come kind of one for one. Students from both Tijuana and from San Diego region come together, spend 7 weeks together. They're all science nerds speaking a language I don't even understand. It is in Spanish, it is in English. They speak nanotechnology. But they're all going to be future engineers. And, they're STEM. It's all STEM-related work. But they're studying together. And, we need parallel programs like that. We need our kids in California, to get to Jim's point, to go to Mexico and spend the semester or spend the summer or spend 3 weeks or, like our program does when it does the research. I need more collaborative research, forces students to meet the other culture.
Okay, thank you very much. We have a couple of minutes for some pressing comments or questions for the panel. Yes, back there. Could you please stand so we can hear you?
So on a daily basis, in terms of border crossing for work-related reasons, what is the percentage differential between people moving from south to north, north to south?
She's got a teacher voice.
Yeah. I don't think we really know that. I mean, it's presumed that there are more people south to north, but because as far as I know, the north to south labor flow tends to be more managerial, and probably some doctors and others as well in there. Whereas the south to north, there's a lot of mechanics and electricians and plumbers and chefs and other fields of which there are more jobs.
Yeah, I think the number I've always known for the south to north, at least at the San Ysidro port of entry, we always figure it's about 10,000 a day. The north to south, I agree, is mostly managerial, those kinds of things. And part of that is a function of, and this is an interesting challenge for both regions, is housing. It's because housing is nobody can afford to live in San Diego. But on a relatively medium wage job in San Diego, you can live pretty decent in Tijuana. And you can even live at the beach. You can live at Playas, you can live in Rosarito.
With a view.
Yeah, San Diego, it would take your 20 years of your teacher salary to pay the down payment. So that's where the challenge is, and that's become increasingly. So there's actually more people, I think, now in doing the south to north in the last few years because of the housing cost. And now Tijuana, but it adds to the problem, Tijuana is building these crazy condos downtown for everybody that you can afford, except are they putting enough sewage? Are they making the developers pay for all the infrastructure you need to kind of avoid some of the other problems with it? But they're building housing, so why aren't we thinking about housing together? We're struggling in California to think about affordable housing. Well, frankly, for San Diego, a lot of the affordable housing is in Tijuana. So that's affecting this whole thing. And now we got delays at the border. You have this shutdown threats. I mean, it's crazy stuff. We lost in San Ysidro, just at the outlet centers next to the pedestrian west. Last fall, when they shut it down on Sunday of Thanksgiving weekend, they lost $5 million in one afternoon, 6 hours shut down. Magnify that with a whole day at 24 hours. Think about it. And that was just this one little San Ysidro, not the rest of San Diego. So retailers, right?
But one of the consequences of sharing that housing market between San Diego and Tijuana is, of course, that the housing market becomes unaffordable for the Mexicans in Tijuana.
Right.
And so it's, unless we have the capacity to actually plan these issues more exactly together, it becomes a problem for the area.
Okay, we are out of time, so please join me in thanking our distinguished panel. Thank you so much. This was very informative, and we will be going to a reception next, and you can speak with any one of us, any one of the panelists, as we move to that direction. Are we going out this way?
There is some wine, local wine, and some Baja next week.
Follow the wine.
You had your beer, now you get your wine. Welcome to Baja.
Thank you so much. That was amazing.
I don't think we've ever met.
You know, we haven't.
I know your name. I've heard your name.
That's our other university challenges, even on our own campuses, and then between our systems, we have no idea who we all are. And we all exist.
I know.
You know, when Janet started our little UC Mexico initiative thing, we all went to this one meeting in Riverside, and we looked around and said, oh my God, are you, you're doing that? Or, oh, there's something going on in Merced.